It was a peaceful Sunday morning in Hawaii. Sailors slept on their ships. Families prepared for church. Then, at 7:55 a.m., the sky filled with planes. The bombs began to fall. America was under attack. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, who planned the attack, feared what would happen next. He wrote, "I fear all we have done is to awaken a sleeping giant and fill him with terrible resolve." He was right. Japan had been expanding for years. In 1931, it invaded Manchuria in northern China. The League of Nations protested. Japan ignored them. They withdrew from the League instead. In 1937, Japan invaded China. The Japanese army captured the Chinese capital, Nanjing. Over 200,000 civilians and prisoners were killed in a brutal campaign. The United States condemned Japan but did not intervene. Japan had a problem. It had almost no natural resources. It needed oil, rubber, and steel to keep its war machine running. Without imports, Japan's army would grind to a halt in 2 years. President Roosevelt responded by cutting off U.S. oil exports to Japan. The British and Dutch followed. Japan had two choices: withdraw from China or go to war with the West. They chose war. Admiral Yamamoto warned against war with America. He had studied in the United States. He knew American industrial power. He warned that Japan could win for 6 months, no longer, but military leaders ignored him. Yamamoto's plan was bold. Attack the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, destroy America's battleships, and buy Japan time to conquer Southeast Asia. The attack would be a surprise. No declaration of war was delivered before the bombs fell. At 7:55 a.m., the first wave of Japanese planes appeared over Oahu. Tora, 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 the code words for complete surprise. They caught the American military completely unprepared. Battleship Row was the main target. At 8:10 a.m., a Japanese armor-piercing bomb struck the USS Arizona. It penetrated the forward magazine. The ship exploded in a massive fireball. Over 1,100 sailors died within seconds. The ship sank in 9 minutes. When the attack ended 2 hours later, over 2,400 Americans were dead. 4 battleships were sunk. Another 4 were damaged. Nearly 200 aircraft were destroyed. But the aircraft carriers, the most important ships, were at sea. They survived. President Roosevelt addressed Congress. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked. Congress declared war on Japan within an hour. Germany declared war on America days later. Japan's military moved fast. Within months, they conquered Hong Kong, Malaya, Singapore, the Philippines, the Dutch East Indies, and Burma. British, Australian, and American forces surrendered by the thousands. Japanese soldiers were often merciless to prisoners.
Obey or you will suffer!
Singapore, the Gibraltar of the East, fell to Japan in just 1 week. Over 80,000 British and Commonwealth soldiers became prisoners of war. It was the worst defeat in British military history. Churchill called it the worst disaster of his life. After the fall of the Philippines, Japanese forces forced 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners to march 65 miles to prison camps. They were given no food and no water. Those who fell were killed. Thousands died along the way. American morale was at an all-time low. President Roosevelt demanded a strike at Japan's homeland.
Against their homeland is essential. Demand it now.
Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle volunteered. He would launch army bombers from an aircraft carrier, something never done before.
This is our mission. Yes, sir.
16 B-25 bombers took off from the USS Hornet. They bombed Tokyo and other Japanese cities. The damage was minor, but the psychological impact was enormous. Japan realized it was not safe. The Doolittle raid changed everything.
The Doolittle raid proves their carriers are a grave threat. We must draw them out and destroy them. Our target is Midway Island. It is the key. A trap at Midway will force their fleet to engage.
After the Doolittle raid, Japan decided to destroy the American aircraft carriers. They planned an attack on Midway Island, a tiny atoll northwest of Hawaii. They hoped to lure the American fleet into a trap. But the Americans knew their plans. American codebreakers had cracked Japan's naval codes. They knew the attack was coming. Admiral Chester Nimitz positioned his carriers near Midway and waited. The trap was reversed. American dive bombers found the Japanese carrier fleet at a critical moment. Their planes were refueling and rearming on deck. Explosions ripped through 4 Japanese carriers. Within minutes, Japan's naval air power was destroyed. Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers, 250 aircraft, and its most experienced pilots. America lost 1 carrier. The Battle of Midway was the turning point of the Pacific War. Japan would never recover from the loss.
Gentlemen, we are launching a new strategy, island hopping. We will bypass their strongholds and seize key islands.
Admiral Nimitz launched a new strategy, island hopping. The American military would capture key islands, bypass heavily defended ones, and move closer to Japan. Each island was a stepping stone. The first major offensive was Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. For 6 months, American Marines and Japanese soldiers fought in the jungle. Thousands died from combat, disease, and starvation. America won. The road to Tokyo was open. Iwo Jima was a small volcanic island. The Japanese had built an underground fortress of tunnels and bunkers. American Marines fought for 36 days. Over 6,800 Americans died. When they raised the flag on Mount Suribachi, it became an iconic image. Okinawa was the last stop before Japan. The battle lasted 82 days. Over 12,000 Americans died. Over 100,000 Japanese soldiers died. Tens of thousands of Okinawan civilians were killed. It was the bloodiest battle of the Pacific. Japanese pilots began crashing their planes into American ships on purpose. They called it kamikaze, the divine wind. Over 3,000 kamikaze pilots died. They sank dozens of ships, but they could not stop the American advance. Military planners estimated that invading Japan would cost over 1 million American casualties. Millions of Japanese civilians would also die. President Truman had to decide, invade or use a secret new weapon. The Manhattan Project had developed the atomic bomb. It was tested in New Mexico in July 1945. Truman warned Japan to surrender or face prompt and utter destruction. Japan refused. On August 6, 1945, the B-29 bomber Enola Gay dropped an atomic bomb on Hiroshima. The city was destroyed. Over 80,000 people died immediately. Thousands more would die from radiation sickness. Japan still did not surrender. On August 9th, a second atomic bomb was dropped on Nagasaki. Over 40,000 died. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender. The war was over. The Pacific War had cost millions of lives, and the age of nuclear weapons had begun. In Part 5, The Holocaust, the systematic persecution and murder of 6 million Jews, the concentration camps, the liberation. This documentary is based on historical records from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, the National World War II Museum, the U.S. Naval History and Heritage Command, and academic sources. Follow Echoes of Time for Part 5 of World War II. The Holocaust is next. Subscribe so you never miss a chapter.